Hi, everybody, and welcome to our Instagram Live series called COVID Chats. We launched this on Monday with Senator Angus King. We were so thrilled to have so many people join us on Monday. With Senator King, we talked about a range of issues from the testing problems to the protests that were happening that day, as well as issues like racial wealth inequality. And we are so honored tonight to continue our series, and we are hosting Senator Susan Collins, also of Maine. So thank you for joining us. This series is led by the Goldfarb Center for Public Affairs at Colby College in Maine. My name is Kimberly Flowers, and I'm the executive director, the new executive director of the Goldfarb Center, and I'll be your host for tonight's discussion. And the original idea of doing this was to give an opportunity for Colby College students to connect with each other and really to engage in real time with policymakers, to talk about politics and policies and everything related to this pandemic and this just unprecedented historical time that we're going through. But we decided to do it on Instagram Live. So it's a public platform. So we welcome everybody. So whether you are from New England or you're a Mainer or someone from the Waterville community or just a global citizen who really cares about this topic, we're thrilled to have you with us tonight. This session will be about 20-25 minutes. We'll be taking questions and comments at the end, first from students, but we'll also turn to the audience. So please feel free to engage in the dialogue by typing in your questions and comments throughout this conversation. It's April 22nd, so what's happening right now? Well, we've learned that the first coronavirus deaths in the United States were earlier than we thought. There is still fierce debate happening about when states are going to reopen their economy. So there's a lot to talk about. And what a great person we have tonight. I mean, Susan Senator Collins has been a public servant for her entire career. She was first elected to Senate in 1996, and as many of you are aware, she is right now up for her fourth re-election campaign this year. She's currently the most senior Republican woman in the Senate. She's known for being a moderate, and she's also known that her vote counts. She's very influential. For the last 6 years, Senator Collins has been ranked as the most bipartisan member of the U.S. Senate. And this one really gets me. She has never missed a vote. She has cast more than 7,300 votes in a row. So as a member of the Health Committee, Senator Collins has been highly involved in congressional efforts to respond to the COVID-19, including authoring the Paycheck Protection Program. So we're going to have her join now. There she is. Hello, how are you?
Hi, Kimberly, and welcome to the great state of Maine.
Thank you.
Thinking how fortunate you are to have moved back.
Thank you. My husband and I are in Belgrade right now, and it's a lovely place to be at a stay-at-home, let me tell you. And you know Colby College well. I mean, you have family connections there. You were given an honorary degree in 2014, as well as a commencement speaker in 2018. So thank you for doing this for Colby College, as well as the Goldfarb Center.
My pleasure.
Well, I think to start, let's just talk about what's most on your mind right now. I know there's a lot of pressing priorities, but what's the biggest thing right now that you're having to deal with this pandemic response?
Perhaps there's so many aspects, but perhaps the number one issue in my mind is how we can scale up production of testing so that we can have the confidence that we've identified individuals who may be asymptomatic and yet are carriers of the virus and thus at risk of spreading it to others, identify people who need treatment and quarantine, and ultimately give people the confidence that we can safely reopen the economy. And that's going to mean far more widespread testing than we're doing now. And we're also going to have to see 14 consecutive days where the number of cases in the state of Maine is declining. Those are the metrics that I'm looking for.
Yeah. What do you say to people? Senator King and I talked about this on Monday, the protests that were happening. What do you say to Mainers who have lost their livelihood and are tired of being home and just want to get back to work. What's your message to them?
Well, I'm extremely sympathetic to them. It's really difficult. Mainers are resilient, they're hardworking, they want
Mm-hmm.
to go to work, and we're very social as well. It's very hard to stay home. And I've never been busier working from, but it is so difficult to do so in many ways, and particularly if you live in the more rural areas of our state that may have lack access to broadband.
Mm,
If you have family members who are in a long-term care facility and you
yeah.
can't visit them, that's very difficult. But I think we all have to exercise patience,
Mm,
because as much as I so want our economy to reopen, we have to do so step by step and safely.
yeah.
So I very much respect the views that people have, and they're exercising their First Amendment rights in
Mhm.
protesting the closures. And I think the governor's looking at how to safely reopen segments of our economy, but it's a difficult decision and one that you don't want to be wrong about.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's talk about the legislation, right? I mean, what a big week in Washington. Every week feels like a big week in Washington. But, yesterday the Senate passed that historic monumental aid package worth $500 billion. I want to hear about your thoughts on the negotiations, your thoughts on the bill, but I'm also curious whether you share Senator Mitch McConnell's view about this skyrocketing federal deficit that we're in. How do you balance that with the amount of aid that is needed for our citizens right now?
Well, that's a great question. I'm going to answer that part of your question first and then go back to what's in the.
Sure.
And that is that we have spent literally trillions of dollars now to combat the coronavirus. But I keep thinking of what would happen if we weren't spending that money.
Mm,
If you look at it from a health perspective, many more people would be dying of the coronavirus, and we would not be making progress on identifying better tests, more
mm,
effective or a means of treatment, and ultimately a vaccine. And so
yeah.
the money, the billions of dollars that we're putting into that in this latest bill contains another $25 billion for testing, 16 million of which will come to the state of Maine and help us purchase tests and administer them. And also, if you look at the economic impact, we went from having an unemployment rate of about 3%, the lowest in 50 years. And
Mm,
now we're looking at unemployment rates of 10, 20, perhaps even 30%.
yeah.
That will cost our budget far more in the long run than the amount of money that we are spending now, enormous though it is. So the collapse of the economy, the devastation of the economy is something that we simply cannot allow to happen. I'm most proud of the fact that the bill extends a program that I co-authored. It's the Paycheck Protection Program, and it's intended to help the employees of small businesses
Mm,
and those small businesses stay afloat through this pandemic to make sure they don't close their doors forever and put their employees out of work forever. And as long as they issue paychecks for 8 weeks, consecutive weeks to their employees, even if those employees have had to be laid off. And for a small business, that means laying off your family members, your friends, your neighbors.
right.
It's very painful. And that's why this program is so important, because when the economy does reopen, we want those small businesses to be able to snap back fast, reunite with their existing employees and who have been paid during this period. And that will help our recovery be so much faster. 320 rather billion dollars is included in this package for the program that I co-authored. Ran out of money in less than 2 weeks, showing
Yeah.
how effective it was. And the third provision is $75 billion more for our hospitals and healthcare providers, and that's vital as well.
Yeah. I mean, when I was reviewing your bio, I realized you've spent a lot of time in your career working on small business issues. Your family has been in business. So I know this is true to your heart. And it's a difficult time. It's a difficult time. So thank you for the work you're doing on that. I want to take a step back for a minute because even though I'm well aware, that Congress has to be completely consumed with the domestic urgent issues they're dealing with, my background is more of a global perspective, and I was on a Zoom call, which we now do. I was on a Zoom call yesterday that CARE organized with Senator Chris Coons, who I'm sure you know, and as he always does, he's fighting for the underprivileged in the developing world, and he was talking about how this is really a remarkable international moment, and that the United States needs to step up and needs to give more international aid to countries to help those that have large populations in poverty and limited resources. Now, I know from your background, you were once on a Global Health Commission at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, or CSIS, which is where I worked before coming to Maine. And so I know you are a champion for global health issues. Talk to us about, what's the role of the United States in being a leader on this from a global perspective, and how do you explain why that's important to someone from Maine?
Well, first of all, we do have to take care of our own population and put that first. And there are more cases of the coronavirus in the United States right now than any other country. So we do need to focus here at home. But I've worked very closely with Senator Chris Coons on a lot of international global health initiatives. And just this past week, I was the lead Republican on a letter to the Appropriations Committee, to the Foreign Operations Subcommittee on global health issues, urged robust funding. And I'm pleased to say that 40 senators signed that letter. So even at this time, when we're dealing with this serious health and economic program at home, we need to recognize that this is a pandemic, worldwide, global in its scope, and that we need to work together with the other countries. That will help us more quickly develop an effective vaccine, a means of treatment, and better tests if we work together. There's a particular bill with Chris Coons that I want to mention that we introduced last year, and it's referred to as the REACH Act, and it was actually the subject of our work with CSIS. And the goal of this is to put an end to preventable maternal and infant deaths worldwide. And a lot of times you can scale up methods that we know work. We know we've got the science to back it all over the world. And it's an ambitious goal, but it's one that I really think is achievable. And I've been delighted to have Chris as my partner in this bipartisan effort.
I'm seeing a question below talking about the role of federal leadership and logistics, but I do want to turn to the federal response. My question was going to be more around, Trump talking about he wants to put a 60-day, pause on issuing green cards. So I guess my question to you is, are you supportive of that move that he's considering to take? And just your general thoughts on the federal response and their leadership right now.
Well, first, let me make very clear that I do not support a 60-day pause on green card holders coming into this country. Many of them are already in this country. They are people who are working here, have long-standing family ties here, And I believe that preventing the issuance of green cards, particularly to those who are already in this country,
Mm-hmm.
does not advance either our health goals or our economic goals. So
Mm.
I do not support that policy. As far as those who are coming into the country, if they are qualifying for green cards, believe me, they've gone through extensive vetting.
Mm-hmm.
They, this is not an easy process to get a
Right.
green card. And to me, we should screen them for health and make sure that they are healthy and that they are tested for the coronavirus before coming in. But I do not support that blanket policy.
Mm-hmm.
In general, you asked me
Yeah.
how to rank the administration's response, and I would say that it's been uneven, very uneven. I supported the president's initial decision to impose a travel ban very quickly on flights to and from China. The president received a lot of criticism for doing that, but it turned out that it was the right decision to make. On the other hand, I think there's times when he has advised certain treatments that have
Mm.
not been yet proven to
Yeah.
be scientifically valid. And I don't think that's helpful. It causes
Mm.
shortages and runs on drugs that are needed to treat lupus and other diseases without the scientific backing to ensure that they are effective. When he listens to his medical advisors, he has excellent ones in Dr. Fauci and Dr. Brick.
Mm-hmm.
I think he does a good job. When he goes off on a tangent uh, and speculates, I think that's not helpful in the kind of in uh, dealing with the kind of crisis that we have.
Yeah. We're going to turn now to some Colby students who they're part of the Goldfarb Student Engagement Committee. We've got Tessa Schrupp and John Browse. We're going to turn to Tessa first, and she's going to write a question at the bottom there. Tessa is actually a senior, and she's a double major, French and Global Studies. And Josh is a freshman. Josh actually initiated and moderated an event on COVID-19 2 months ago. So this is an issue that our students have been thinking about for some time. So we'll just wait as Tessa writes in this question. There's been a lot of other comments and questions coming in. We see one right now saying, "Love you, Senator Collins. Keep up the good work and best of luck on your campaign." For those that are watching this video after the live session, I know you can't see the comments that are coming in, but right now we have 74 people online with us, which is great. We're really pleased about that. And so while we're waiting for Tessa, I can't tell if that is coming. Let's see. No, that's a different one. Well, we already talked about, I see a question from someone else. Well, while we're waiting for Tessa, you actually already gave a message, I think, at the beginning for the protesters talking about the stay-at-home orders. We're going to wait just a minute to see and tell Tessa. There might be a lot of comments, so sometimes there's a bit of a delay. While we're doing that, I noticed that in the CARES Act, there's some money there that that is going towards Colby College and students in financial need more financial aid. Do you want to talk about that while we're waiting for Justice questions?
I do. I lobbied very hard for there to be a pool of money that would go to institutions of higher education like Colby and their students. It's important to know that half the money needs to be used to provide relief for students. That may be giving them technology or
Mm-hmm.
housing allowance, since all of a sudden they've lost their plans are totally up in the air.
Yeah.
And I know that colleges have had to refund room and board, and that's put a real stress on them. I talked to a Maine college yesterday that really is concerned about whether they'll make it through
Mm.
this crisis. Now, Colby is in good financial shape, as are Bowdoin and Bates, but if you look at a lot of our smaller colleges in Maine or the University of Maine system, which will be fine because it gets some public support, but it's a tremendous strain and a great deal of money that the university system and these smaller colleges, as well as Colby, have had to refund. But plus, they're trying to meet the needs of their students. And I give
Yeah.
Colby tremendous credit for doing everything from buying airplane tickets for
Yeah.
their students, giving them computers so that they could do remote learning if they didn't already have access to computers, uh,
Mm-hmm.
shuttles to airports. I think Colby has really done a terrific job. But initially, the funding was only going to be for K through 12. Uh,
Mm.
and I did work with Lamar Alexander, the chairman of the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, on which I serve, to make sure that we had a pool of money for higher education.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
I will say that I was very glad to see that some of the very wealthy colleges in our country, like Harvard, which has an endowment of something like $40 billion, is giving the money back because that's not what it's intended for.
Right. Well, I saw Tessa's question while we were talking, and her question has to do with the massive uptick in unemployment and the filings for unemployment. So, do you think Maine is equipped to handle that?
Maine has had a difficult time handling the huge influx of unemployment claims. I remember reading that in just 3 days in March, Maine received more than double the amount of March of last year for the whole month. So I think it's not surprising that they're overwhelmed, but I hear a lot of concerns expressed about this. Um, a lot of states are having the same problem that Maine is in coping with this huge influx. They tend to have older computer systems that are not easily reprogrammed. In the Senate, we extended the unemployment program so that it will go through the end of this year, which is longer than the normal state period. And there's also a plus up in the amount of the benefit, but most important, it allows self-employed individuals and those with shorter work history to qualify for unemployment, which they usually would not. So I'm surprised that the state legislature adjourned rather than providing more resources to the State
Mm.
Department of Labor to deal with this influx.
Yeah. So our next question is going to be from Josh, and Josh is the freshman that I mentioned earlier. While we're waiting for Josh to type in his question, I do see a couple of questions from our audience talking about whether you're going to vote for Trump. Did you vote for Trump? You know, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I will tell you that right now I am focused on my own campaign, but I'm not even focused on that right now. Right now, I'm focused on the pandemic. And if ever there were a time when we should put partisan politics aside, now is the time. So you may have noticed that on television, I've run a series of essentially public service announcements telling people where they can get help, thanking our frontline workers, whether they're grocery store uh, shelf stockers and cashiers, or whether they're hospital workers or first responders. And I think that's appropriate. I think it's not a time uh, for partisan politics. As
Mhm.
is well known, I did not support President Trump in the last election. I wrote in the name of Paul Ryan. I've been public about that. And I know Joe Biden very well, having served many years with him, worked on a lot of first responder issues with him now. I've also developed a relationship with this administration, and I will work with whomever is elected as president.
I'm gonna go ahead for the sake of time and tell you that a question that I know Josh was interested in. He still might come through, but I know Josh wanted to talk about the planned prisoner coronavirus release program, and that the Trump administration recently reversed that. So he's curious about how should Maine be working with its prison population in response to COVID-19. What do you think about that?
Well, the president, so Attorney General, at first put out some guidance that was unclear on whether or not you had to have served 50% of your sentence before you could be released. But the goal was to ensure that we did not have an outbreak of coronavirus among not just prisoners, but correctional officers who are working at prisons and cooks and other people who are staff our prisons. There seemed to be some confusion on the criteria for that. So I'm not sure that it's been reversed. I think there's confusion on exactly what the federal policy is. Here in Maine, the governor has said that she's calling for a step-by-step approach, that there will not be mass commutations of sentences, but I think they're looking at earlier release for people who are close to completing their sentences at both the federal and the state level, to send them back home a bit early. But the dispute on the federal level is how early.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have to wrap up, but before we do, I've seen a couple of questions that are in the same sort of category, which have to do, what can we do to help? There's one on there right now that talks about living out of state. What could she do? Her and her husband's in the military, it looks like. So what can she do to help people remotely working? I'm sorry, what can people do remotely for Maine? But also there was another question earlier, just what can we do to help? So let's end on that note, as well as any other final comments you'd like to make.
Well, one thing that I'd like to mention is I'm very worried about the seniors in our state who are living alone and who used to come to congregate meal sites each week and had not only a nutritious lunch, but had socialization. And I know, as the chairman of the Senate Aging Committee, from a hearing I held, that prolonged isolation and loneliness is very damaging to your physical, emotional, and mental health. And so we're the oldest state in the nation by median age. We have a lot of seniors who are living by themselves. So if you know some of them, reach out to them in a safe way. You may not be able to visit them, but surely you can send a card or a letter or give them a call on the phone, or also email if they have email available to them. So I'd really encourage that. That's something that doesn't cost any money, that all of us can do. My mother's 93. She just celebrated her birthday in Caribou, and I felt bad that my husband and I and our black lab Pepper couldn't go out and join her. But I think that kind of reaching out is really important. The other thing is, if you can be a Meals on Wheels driver, they've lost an awful lot of their volunteers. They're delivering meals in a safe way. A lot of times it's left for the individual, and they really need the help. And our area agencies on aging run a lot of the Meals on Wheels programs. And again, that's a way that you can help take care of our seniors. And finally, our food banks need help. They need volunteers. You can put on masks and a cloth mask and see if you can go pack a box for them, for example, or help out in other ways. But in general, I think Maine people and Maine businesses have really stepped up to the plate. If you think of the LL Bean, for example, it's converted its bean boot factory into making masks. New Balance, its Norwich block factory, has converted from making sneakers to making masks. And so we've really seen companies in our state, great employers, stepping up to the plate, and individuals volunteering their time, their money, their energy to help those who are less fortunate. It's a hard time. It's scary time for many people who never dreamed they'd be unemployed. And that's why I'm really proud of the bill that I wrote, because it's helping 180,000 employees and nearly 17,000 small businesses stay afloat, and has brought $2.2 billion into our state. So I think we all need to work together. And the last thing we need right now is partisan politics. Thank you so much, Kimberly.
Thank you. We're not sure why we've had our technical glitch. Your screen right now has gone to purple, but we can hear you just fine. But I just want to thank you so much, and I also want to thank people for the comments. I know we weren't able to get all of your questions. We appreciate your comments, whether you agree or disagree with us. That's what this forum is about. And we just want to say thank you one more time to Senator Susan Collins. Thank you to all of you. You can continue to follow Goldfarb Center on Instagram, and we have speakers next week, including Henry Beck, who's state's main treasurer, as well as Representative Matt Ritter from Connecticut, both Colby alums. Thank you so much, and have a good night.
Thank you.